Darkness. Everywhere, darkness. It clung to the old mansion like a shroud. The moon, a pale ghost behind the clouds, did little to pierce the gloom. Shadows stretched from every corner, gnarled branches of the ancient oaks in the overgrown gardens reaching out like skeletal fingers. The mansion stood alone, a monument to forgotten grandeur, now home only to silence and secrets. Built in the heyday of the Gilded Age, the mansion had once pulsed with life. Laughter echoing in the grand ballroom, music drifting from the conservatory, the clinking of champagne glasses in the dining room. But time, like a relentless tide, had eroded its grandeur. And yet someone did. Mac. A name whispered on the wind, a shadow moving through the decaying grandeur. He called the mansion home, though the word held little warmth in this desolate place. His reasons for seeking solace within its crumbling walls were his own, a past he kept locked away as tightly as the secrets the mansion held. In the flickering lamplight, his face was a study in contrasts. A weariness etched around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and haunted dreams. Yet there was a hint of steel in his gaze, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished by the shadows that surrounded him. He was a man caught between running from his past and confronting his demons, and Mac, despite his better judgment, was a curious man. The mansion was a labyrinth of echoing halls and forgotten rooms. Dust lay thick as snowdrifts, undisturbed for years. Mac moved through it with a familiarity born of necessity, his footsteps silent on the threadbare carpets. He knew the creaks and groans of the old house, the way the wind whistled through the broken window panes, the scuttling sounds of mice in the walls. He found himself drawn as if by an unseen hand to a part of the mansion he rarely visited. The East Wing. It had been sealed off for decades, the door locked and the key long gone. The reasons for this were lost to time or perhaps deliberately forgotten, buried beneath layers of dust and decay. He should turn back. And yet he pressed on, driven by a force he couldn't quite name, a need to see what lay hidden in the darkness. At the end of the corridor, shrouded in shadow, stood a door. It was a heavy, imposing thing, crafted from dark, gnarled wood that seemed to absorb the meagre light. Unlike the other doors in the mansion, which hung askew on broken hinges, this one was perfectly aligned, its surface smooth and undisturbed. A thick chain, rusted and ancient, held it fast, looped through a heavy padlock the size of Mac's fist. The sight of it sent a shiver down his spine. This door was not meant to be opened. Despite the warning signs screaming at him, Mac found himself inexplicably drawn to the door. His fingers, as if possessed by a will of their own, reached into his pocket and retrieved a small, tarnished key he hadn't seen in years. It had been tucked away in an old box, a forgotten relic from his past. He stared at it, a strange mix of fear and fascination warring within him. He had no memory of taking the key, no recollection of why he kept it, and yet he knew with chilling certainty that it belonged here, that it was the key to the forbidden door. The padlock, as if sensing its hold was broken, fell away from the chain, landing with a thud on the dusty floor. The chain, no longer tethered, hung loose, its weight a tangible reminder of the barrier it had once represented. Mac hesitated, his hand hovering inches from the door. He could still turn back, pretend he had never seen the key, never felt the pull of the unknown, but the die was cast. The padlock lay on the ground, its silence a broken promise. As the chain fell away, it revealed something else. Carved into the ancient wood, barely discernible in the dim light, were symbols. They were not the elegant scrollwork of the mansion's era, but something older, more primal. Swirling lines and strange, angular shapes, like the glyphs of a forgotten language. Mac's breath caught in his throat. He was playing with fire, he knew that, but the flames of curiosity burned too brightly to be ignored. With a deep breath, Max steeled himself and pushed against the heavy door. It groaned in protest, hinges screaming like tortured souls after years of silence. The air inside was different. It wasn't just the musty scent of decay common to long-sealed rooms, but something altogether more oppressive. The temperature plummeted, the air growing thin and frigid, as if the room itself exhaled a breath of Arctic winter. But the curiosity that had brought him this far was a relentless master, whispering promises of forbidden knowledge. The interior of the room was swallowed by an impenetrable darkness, the meager light from the hallway vanishing as if consumed by a hungry void. Max strained to see, his eyes struggling to adjust, his heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum. He could feel the darkness pressing in on him, suffocating, all-encompassing. He took a hesitant step forward, his footfall silent on the thick carpet of dust that blanketed the floor. The air grew colder, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. He felt a presence in the room, watching him, though he could see nothing through the oppressive gloom. Something brushed against his leg, soft and feathery light as a breath. He recoiled with a startled cry, his hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight in his pocket. He had made a terrible mistake. The silence in the room was absolute, yet it pressed down on Mac with the weight of 1,000 tons. The air itself seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, sending shivers down his spine. His hand trembled as he gripped the flashlight, its beam a fragile bastion against the encroaching darkness. A sound, barely audible at first, reached his ears. A whisper, soft and sibilant, seeming to emanate from the very walls themselves. He swung the flashlight beam towards the source of the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. They spoke of ancient things, of forgotten rituals, of a darkness that lay at the heart of the world, waiting to be unleashed. Mac's finger tightened on the switch of his flashlight, its beam his only solace in the encroaching darkness. He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, whispering to him that he had stumbled upon something he was never meant to see, something that should have remained hidden. The whispers reached a fever pitch, swirling around him like a vortex of madness. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the sounds, to regain some semblance of control over his mounting fear. When he opened them again, he saw it. A shape, barely discernible in the gloom, coalesced near the back of the room. Terror, pure and primal, flooded through Mac's veins. Section 3, Panic, Darkness, Total and Absolute. Mac was engulfed by it, the shadows pressing in on him from all sides, suffocating him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He was trapped, alone in the heart of the mansion's darkness, with something ancient and evil. He scrambled blindly for the flashlight, his fingers scraping against the rough wood of the floor. The whispers were closer now, surrounding him, mocking his fear. They seemed to slither into his ears, whispering promises of madness and despair, tempting him to surrender to the darkness. He had to get out, had to escape the suffocating darkness of the room before it claimed him completely. Desperation clawed at Mac's throat. He hammered his fists against the cold stone, a primal scream dying in his throat. The whispers were all around him now, louder than ever, seeming to seep into his very bones, chilling him to the core. A gust of icy wind slammed against him, extinguishing his last hope. The door. It had slammed shut, sealing him inside the room with the entity. He was trapped alone in the darkness with whatever lurked within the shadows. The whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of guttural sounds, of inhuman screams and tortured cries. Max sank to the floor, his back against the cold stone, his arms wrapped around his knees. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the darkness was absolute, all-consuming. He had been a fool to think he could unlock the mansion's secrets without consequence. Curiosity had led him here, to this moment of abject terror, and now he would pay the price. The oppressive silence stretched, each tick of the unseen clock a hammer blow to Mac's sanity. His eyes, now adjusted to the impenetrable darkness, still strained to pierce the gloom, searching for the source of the silence that felt far more menacing than the whispers it replaced. Then a glimmer. A faint, ethereal light, like the first glimmer of dawn, appeared at the base of the heavy wooden door. Hope, fragile and unexpected, flickered within Mac's chest. It was a sliver of light in the all-consuming darkness, a beacon calling him back from the abyss of despair. He stumbled towards it, his hand outstretched, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The oppressive presence that had settled over him seemed to recede slightly, like a predator momentarily distracted from its prey. The light, though faint, offered a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. With renewed determination, fueled by a primal need to escape the horrors of the room, Mac threw himself against the heavy door. It creaked open a fraction of an inch, just enough for the sliver of light to widen, revealing a glimpse of the dust-filled hallway beyond. Section 2. Fleeing into the labyrinth. The hallway, once a place of foreboding, now represented salvation. Mac squeezed through the narrow opening, his body trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. He slammed the door shut behind him, the sound echoing ominously in the silent mansion. The sliver of light vanished, plunging the east wing back into its unnatural darkness. He didn't waste time looking back. Driven by pure adrenaline, he ran. He ran through the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion, his footsteps echoing on the bare wooden floors, his breath ragged in the stillness. Each turn he took, each doorway he passed, seemed to further distance him from the horrors of the locked room. A faint light flickered deeper within the mansion, beckoning him forward. He remembered now, it was the light he had left burning in the main hall, a beacon in the darkness he had foolishly abandoned in his pursuit of the unknown. It was a symbol of the life he had almost lost, a life he was now desperate to reclaim. Section 3. The whispers follow. As he ran, Mac couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. The oppressive presence that had pervaded the locked room seemed to cling to him, a shadow he couldn't outrun. The air grew colder, the scent of decay stronger, as if the very walls of the mansion were closing in on him. And then he heard it, a whisper, faint and indistinct, carried on the edge of his hearing. It was not the cacophony of voices that had assaulted him in the room, but a single chilling whisper close enough to send a shiver down his spine. He dared not slow down, dared not acknowledge the voice he knew was following him. To stop, to even turn his head, would be to surrender to the darkness, to admit that he was not alone in the vast emptiness of the mansion. He pushed himself harder, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for respite. But the whisper followed, growing louder with each passing moment, a constant reminder of the horror he had unleashed. Section 4. The door remains open. Finally, he burst into the main hall, the faint light he had left burning welcoming him back from the brink of madness. He slammed his hand against the wall, gasping for breath, his body trembling with exhaustion and terror. His fingers brushed against the cold metal of a light switch. He flicked it on, bathing the hall in a warm, reassuring glow. But the relief was short-lived. His gaze fell upon the entrance to the east wing, the heavy wooden door, the one he had struggled so desperately to close, now stood ajar. A sliver of impenetrable darkness peered out from the opening, as if the entity within were watching him, waiting for him to let down his guard. He had escaped the locked room, but the darkness had followed him. It was no longer confined to the east wing, but had seeped into the very fabric of the mansion, tainting everything it touched. He realized, with chilling certainty, that he was not safe. Not truly. The entity was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. Section 5. Forever Haunted. Mac stood frozen in the center of the hallway, caught between the familiar comfort of the main hall and the encroaching darkness of the east wing. He was a prisoner in his own home, trapped by the very curiosity that had led him to this point. He knew he could never truly leave the mansion. The events of that night had irrevocably changed him, branding him with the mark of the entity. He would forever be haunted by the whispers, by the glimpse he had caught of the abyss that lay just beyond the veil of reality. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows across the dusty floor, Mac made a choice. He would stay. He would face the darkness that he had unleashed, even if it consumed him. He would become the mansion's new guardian, a silent sentinel standing watch over the secrets it held, forever bound to the horrors of the locked room. The mansion was no longer just a refuge, it was his prison, and he its warden.